Hello and welcome again. I really wish I could tell my entire biofouling story all over again, but I think they'll have to be on another day. Uh, this is an important panel. I really wanted to help on this uh, because not only that I'd been working on these underwater technologies, I was volunteering at the California Military Department, and they figured since I knew something about robotics, I should probably know cybersecurity. So I ended up learning a lot of cybersecurity, even though that was not my field. And through that, all the other issues that exist in security and defense of our state and nation. So I've got to know a lot of people who work in that very important field. And we have got four very important guests here. I would say when we talk about maritime security technologies, we would broadly, for the purposes of this panel, split them in two areas. One would be the whole field of maritime cybersecurity, which itself has sort of two parts to it. There is the organizational cybersecurity, and then there is cybersecurity as the physical systems are connected, which is called the ICS. And when you have things that can get hijacked and valves and controllers can be moved because somebody hacked into your computer. So there's that whole gamut of cybersecurity. And then you have aspects of real physical security, of how the vessels are behaving around each other, how the unmanned vessels are going around each other and not running into problems. And finally getting down to what are the right kind of sensors and technologies that help make them work and make things secure and let the collisions and other things be avoided. So I will start off by welcoming Buzz Montoro. He's with United States Coast Guard in the cyber group, where he would give us a little overview of how the United States Coast Guard is here to help all the organizations in the maritime industry. Please.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Just 2 seconds on my background. I just retired after 30 years of Coast Guard service. I was my last position was as captain of the port for Chicago and Milwaukee, and now I'm back as a civilian working in cybersecurity here in San Diego. Much warmer, which is nice. I looked at the weather in Milwaukee, and I'm glad to be in San Diego. So one of the principal focuses now, just within the last 5 years of the Coast Guard, has been in the cyber domain, focused on protecting our maritime transportation system. As many of you already know, about a quarter of our GDP is in the maritime domain, 23 million people employed just in the US alone. And so the Coast Guard, although we may have been a little bit slow to the game, has invested millions of dollars just in the last 3 to 4 years in bringing in talent to focus in this area and provide support to industry in really two areas. One being prevention. And that's primarily what I do. I work with facilities in the Port of San Diego to ensure that they have cybersecurity plans and they conduct their proper assessments to ensure that they mitigate their risk and reduce the number of vulnerabilities associated with their cyber infrastructure. And then another capability that we have recently rolled out just in the last few years is a cyber response capability, which very closely aligns with the FBI's cyber response capability and CISA's cyber response capability. And we conduct very routine, almost weekly assessments at different ports throughout the country. So moving through my presentation, as you can see, 90% of commerce for the US flows through maritime domain. In LA alone, I just saw a study that showed that there's several 100,000 cyber attacks on the port of LA and LB every month. And so this is incredibly important to us. The number of attacks to facilities and vessels operating in US waters, just in the last month, I just saw a report was significant attacks and breaches of security were greater than 50. So we're becoming more and more focused on ensuring that we work with our partners in industry and in other public organizations to ensure that we're securing the domain. And so how are we doing that? We're really focusing our lines of effort in 3 areas. First, and this is kind of predates a lot of the work that I've done, is ensuring our cyber infrastructure within our organization and those networks that connect with DoD remain secure. So we have a whole focused group on that. Where my focus is then in the second line of effort, which is in securing the maritime transportation security infrastructure. And so we've spent quite a bit of time in the last 5 years focused on that. And then the last one is operating in the cyber domain. And that's a lot of, as a DoD, or excuse me, as a military service and a member of DHS, you think of all the law enforcement and national security operations that we're conducting that are more offensive vice defensive. So those are the 3 focuses of the Coast Guard right now in cyber. And so how are we doing this? One of the optimum tools that we've brought to the forefront recently are our cyber protection teams. So we have 2 teams, one in Virginia at the U.S. Cyber Command. Actually, it's in Fort Meade. And the second one is now just being stood up in Alameda. And they respond to cyber attacks. So if a terminal or facility is involved in an attack, they help identify the area, conduct the forensics, and help the facility get back on its feet. And as you can see, I mean, we're all familiar with the MTS supply chains. Obviously, during the pandemic, we saw massive disruptions to our supply chains. And what we also saw during that time was a massive rise in the number of cyber attacks to our MTS. So when we were all focused on the pandemic, that didn't stop nation state actors and cyber criminals and cyber individuals that just wanted to probe at certain vulnerabilities, and we saw that impact the infrastructure as well. And so our focus in the Coast Guard is primarily on the operations technology side. So think about cranes moving, vessels moving in and out of port, anything that moves commerce is what we're really focused on. So PLCs and your SCADA and all those other types of equipment, we're ensuring working with the facilities to preserve those. And it really comes down to, and Billy can talk a little bit more about this, segmentation and segregation of your OT to your IT, making sure that you close ports and you're ensuring that remote access is kept to a minimum, almost to the level of air gapping many of your systems, and definitely trying to keep your IT and your OT apart as much as possible. And again, these are the ways that our CPTs operate. They go in and they do their assessments. That's one of the things that I assist with. And then they do their pen testing and get into clearing out those vulnerabilities, and then providing their assessments to their clients. And one of the things that they provide to, I know for like the Port of San Diego, I just read an assessment that was done for another company here in San Diego. When they come out, I get to read these after action reports and where these organizations are vulnerable. And it's probably all the things you hear whenever you're reading tech journals or just listening to podcasts. But it's the human source is the greatest vulnerability, right? It's bad passwords, not updating your networks, using operating systems that are out of date, and giving permissions to individuals that are elevated beyond the needs that they need, that they require. Again, our capabilities are both proactive and reactive. So we can come before, as the ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. And so we get there and really, so what we've done here in San Diego, we have 14 MITSA facilities here in San Diego. I work with the facilities to conduct their assessments and help them craft security plans that will eliminate future vulnerabilities. And then the captain of the port actually approves those plans And we go out on an annual basis. We audit, we conduct exercises, we make sure that their training system is up to date. And then if, God forbid, they are the victim of a cyber attack, we can come in and assist them, along with, oftentimes they bring in private contractors as well. So that's the Coast Guard's capability. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Buzz. So let me welcome Billy Marsh. He is Chief Information Security Officer at Port of San Diego, and he'll give you a more specific case.
Hello, I'm Billy Marsh, as stated, Chief Information Security Officer, Port of San Diego. I've been doing information security or cybersecurity in some way, shape, or form for the last 20 years, both offensive and defensive security. But knowing who I am isn't really going to help you a whole lot. You guys want to know how to defend yourselves from attacks on either your computer systems or physical systems. So on the computer side, the best thing that you can do is take your systems and just dump them into the harbor. That's the best way to secure them. No one's going to get into them if they can even find them. Failing that, though, there are some advanced things that you can do to secure your systems, but really the basics are what's going to give you the best bang for your buck. This is multi-factor authentication and setting up a patching system, staying current on updates. The other thing that you should do is develop an incident response plan. So I'm going to get into those in a little bit here. Multi-factor authentication, you use a password to log into your system, and then there's a secondary method. It's usually something you have, something you know, something you are. So a password is typically something you know. Something you have or something you are. Something you have would be like your cell phone. I don't have my badge on me, but an access badge and a one-time password token, things of that nature, where you enter a code in or you badge in, and something you are would be like a retina scan, a face scan, a fingerprint, a vein scan. Those are very hard to forge. Not impossible, but difficult. So if you're logging in and let's say you log into a malicious site, they lift your username and they lift your password. They try to log in to your account and they're going to get to the username stage and the password stage, but they're not going to be able to fulfill that additional form of authentication. So that's going to stop them dead in their tracks right there. There are advanced methods where they can circumvent those, but those are very infrequent, not very common. And you're at that point, you're kind of chasing down that 1%. The other thing that I mentioned was system patching. So this isn't just Windows patching. While Windows patching is really important and it does cover you a large percent of the way, there are more things that ports and critical infrastructure typically use that is not just Windows. It's proprietary software that comes from a vendor. It's firmware on, say, a crane or ship systems. It's software that you run on that machine. So your Adobe patches for Adobe Reader is not going to be part of your Windows updates. So it's really important to really establish a good catalog of what's being used in your systems, and just developing even if it's 3 months, which is, it's not great, but it's not terrible, and it's a lot better than not patching at all. So just develop a process of, we're going to take this time, once every month to patch Windows systems, and once every 3 months to make sure the third-party software is up to date. And with multi-factor authentication and Windows patching, that's going to take you 95% of the way there. When I was doing offensive security, if a system was patched or if I had multi-factor authentication, that was one of our largest headaches. Because typically what we prey on is systems that have not been patched, sometimes in years. Sometimes it's systems that are end of life. And some vendors, you sometimes just don't have that option. Sometimes there's critical software that you're running on ship systems or in port systems, and there's nothing you can do because either that vendor is no longer in business, or they're not responding to vulnerabilities that have been discovered in their software. So something that Buzz mentioned earlier is segmentation of that network, OT, IT, keeping all that separate. And then even within those islands, segmenting further. This is more advanced than just, multi-factor authentication and Windows patching, but it's also really important to note. Because if there are instances where you come up against that, there's literally nothing you can do to patch that system, the next best thing is to shield it away as much as possible. I spent a long time in the medical industry, and they suffer a lot of those same problems where sometimes that vendor doesn't exist anymore, and that $500,000 MRI machine, the hospital can't afford to get a new one. So you segment it and you shield it as much as you can, and then when the attackers, because it's not if, it's when the attackers get in, you want to shield that equipment as much as possible. Which brings me to the last thing that I mentioned, is an incident response plan. Because like I just said, it's not if, it's when. There's going to be an incident, and having a plan established beforehand, knowing what to do, who to contact, which agency to get a hold of, it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of headache when you're kind of scrambling. And when you're in the middle of an incident, you don't realize how many different directions you end up going. It's really important to know whose responsibility it is to do the forensics, whose responsibility it is to provide the communication to either upper management or out to the public. And developing a unified message really helps the organization, both internally and externally, so that you can get either the help that you need and also relay to other agencies where you're currently at in the process. So one of the things I'm also going to mention is we did an engagement with CPT, cyber protection team over at the Coast Guard, and that was a fantastic engagement. They basically performed a pen test. So one of the other things that you can do from the almost kind of like a reconnaissance standpoint, but a kind of gathering information, is to perform a penetration test on your systems. So you can gather this information that you would obtain from that penetration test and say, all right, here are all of our vulnerabilities. You can then take that and give it to the legal team and say, hey, this is now your problem. You know about it. Now you have to fix it. So it's a really good way of obtaining funding, which was mentioned can be very difficult. And if you have funding to fix these problems and you have a piece of paper that basically says, this is our ticket list, these are all the things that we need to fix, they have a much easier time giving you money to get those things taken care of, or justifying a grant in order to punch those things out and say, all right, this is what we're up against. This is approximately how much it's going to cost. Let's go find a grant, or let's talk to finance and say, now that you know these risks are here and it's been vetted by a third party, let's get it fixed. So with that, multi-factor authentication, systems patching, and have a good incident response plan. All right, thank you.
Okay, so now that you have that nuts and bolts covered, let me welcome Jim Harvey. He served in the military, in the Navy, cryptologic technology, and I really think for somebody who was the head of innovation at the Navy SEALs, has stories to tell. And not only that he has served in Iraq, Afghanistan, all that, but also is an expert in looking at new technologies in robotics, unmanned systems. Please, Jim.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Real excited to talk to the 12 people sitting around here. So just kidding. So I was like, oh, it's not many people. It's going to be nice. So yeah, just as he said, I had the pleasure of working with Naval Special Warfare Command, which is the headquarters of the SEAL teams. I was in the Navy for 20 years as a cryptologist, did multiple combat deployments with the special operations community, eventually getting put into a position where I was the head of what became known as the Innovation Directorate. And one of the things that they let us do in that office is they said, hey, we'll let you do whatever you want, but we're not going to give you a budget. I'm like, okay, so that sounds nice. So I had to run out and I had to find money from other organizations to fund efforts that we felt were going to be innovative in changing the way that we did our job. And so what I'm going to give you an example of is one of the different types of efforts that we went after and how that pertains to maritime security, how that ties back into some of the cyber discussion that we've already had, and how that really ties back into really autonomous robotics. So one of the things that we first started messing with was we thought, what is a way that we could mitigate risk to the people that are doing these very dangerous jobs, but also decreasing their cognitive load at the exact same time? How do we take the burden away from them as we begin to expand into a more dangerous world, especially as we move away from what we were focusing on in the past, which was like the global war on terror, and focusing more on things like what we refer to now as great power competition, where you're dealing with larger nations in actual war with other larger countries. So one of the things that we first started working with, and this is in 2016, Secretary of State, the late Ash Carter, he established something called the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. And what DIUX, now known as DIU, did is they used other transactional authority to establish contracts with small businesses to begin doing quick work for the Department of Defense. OTAs, if you're not familiar, it's the exact same way that SpaceX does contracts with NASA. It's really how the DoD is able to utilize and quit contracting. Well, one of the companies, I'm not going to name the company because there's a positive and a negative side of what ended up happening, but this company worked with unmanned surface vehicles. And what we started doing is we started putting lots of different sensors on these systems, like when it came to electronic warfare, like things that could detect radio waves, magnetometers, as well as cameras for doing electro-optical or infrared onto these systems that could stay out at sea for years at a time if we needed them to. And in the process of taking these larger persistent systems and putting them out at sea and we experimenting with them, we come up with a number of different issues, both internal to our own organization as well as to the community, the emerging technologies writ large. And the first one was the model at which we were doing things when it came to integrating technology was always based upon, can we buy something rather than can we use something? And so earlier discussions, the previous panels, they talked about the value of data. And in Silicon Valley tends to go about things with like a service-based model where they offer a service to give you the data that you need in order to conduct whatever it is that you're trying to do, as opposed to buying the hardware. With these unmanned surface vehicles, they were offering their data as a service, as opposed to just selling you their vehicles. And to the government, that was a very confusing concept because that's not how they operate. Ironically, that's actually how their money is set up. Their money is set up from a labor standpoint to pay for services, but they always wanted to buy things. Now, why is this relevant? Well, when we started playing with these systems, we realized the benefit of autonomous robotics and how it's going to affect the maritime space in the future and the issues with that. The previous speakers talked a lot about making sure that you have the ability to defend through multi-factor authentication and different cyber attacks that you might have. Well, as time goes by, we are going from an analog world of interacting with the maritime environment to a digital one, to one in which humans will no longer be involved in many cases. And that's going to happen at two levels, at a persistent level and in a non-persistent level. The persistent level we know historically has just been like with buoys, right? And those buoys have just added sensors, more power, more capability as time goes by. But as those things begin to move around and are able to do more, you're able to cover larger areas of space with these persistent systems. Now, autonomous robotics have the ability for us to not only persist, but to conduct particular types of behaviors and missions within those spaces, which changes the paradigm of security as a whole, whether it be somewhere smallish as the San Diego Bay or the entire coast. You could cover them with different kinds of capabilities. And that's really where autonomous robotics fills a different niche. And that comes into what you usually refer to as the 3Ds. Those are the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. Security, having been somebody who in the military had to stand a lot of watches, security is the most boring thing that you could ever have to do until that 1% when it's the most horrifying thing that you could ever have to be involved with. And that dull aspect of it, especially as you involve humans, leads to complacency. The dangerous, conversely, also leads to complacency for a completely different reason. You're either at a state where you're paying attention and nothing is happening, or you're at a state where something could potentially happen at all moments and you become weary. So as humans, we are the biggest limitation in our security. So how do we enhance that? Well, when it comes to the sensors we're able to implement, the hardware that we're able to put out in the field to do the job, and the communications infrastructure we're able to put in place to make all those things happen. All of those enhance and expand the ability in which we're able to secure and persist in certain environments that can protect the assets that we have in place, or to protect the environment that we're trying to protect. And so with that, though, you have an entirely different way in which we look at collision regulations when it comes to how craft are operating beyond just AIS and how they're pulling that data. We're really going into a space in which we're going from an Internet of Things, or as has been phrased in a recent discussion that we had at the Start Blue program, with an ocean of things, where the sensors are now both in every environment in which you're interacting, both in the air, on the surface of the water, and in underwater. And the underwater environment in particular is second only to space in its difficulty. And so when I go back to that dull, dirty, and dangerous aspect of things, putting people in this massive environment for long periods of time is not a sustainable way of conducting any type of operation. We are the limiting factor in that. So from a security standpoint, looking at robotics in the future is something that ultimately we found is something that's going to not only change the market, but it's going to be disruptive in the sense of how security itself is operated. And not just in the sense of how do we defend and protect, but from an adversarial standpoint, how other people will begin to try to penetrate, both from a deploying those particular types of capabilities and as well as doing it from a cyber standpoint. And that's about as far as I'll go into that part of the conversation. But yeah, it could happen on every level and every paradigm. So security is not just that there's every realm at which you can talk about it, from the cyber to the physical, as well as to the water itself. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Well, that's a good tee up because John Marcus from Norbit Subsea is going to take you to the next level, where what Jim was just talking about, the overall systems. John deals with the actual components and sensors that help us see the underwater data. I think so. Go for it.
Test. Okay. Can I grab the remote? Sure. All right. Norbit, unlike the movie, is a technology company based in Norway. We've been around since the late 70s. We have offices all over the world. We're involved in a lot of different technology applications, primarily at the sensor level. So we're providing the data that these guys are securing in a lot of environments. But we're a raw sensor manufacturer, and we have quite a few different examples of that. Since this slide was made, we're about 450 employees. We've got great core values, and we really we focus on employee refinement. So we have a pretty good team of people in the security domain. Where we extend to is sensors and software, applications that go on top of the sensors, which can be detection algorithms, et cetera. And we do services as well to enhance our security offerings. I only have 1,000 slides, so I'm gonna, don't blink. All right, so for most of our business is in acoustic devices. So what you can see here on the left side panel is a selection of our sonars. We have 360-degree sonars that are used for diver and submarine detection. We have very compact imaging systems that are used on vehicles. We provide mapping systems to USGS, et cetera, Army Corps for safety of navigation within ports and harbors. We also have a product we acquired a few years ago that is on Norwegian Coast Guard patrol boats, and that's the bottom picture there. That's actually not a subsea product. That's an ITAR-controlled infrared camera with some video and some really bright lights. It's used in a variety of oil and gas operations and for safety of those operations. So you can see most of our systems are extremely compact, and that's been one of the things that we've driven in the market, is making things easy to integrate. Again, keeping personnel out of harm's way and doing things that make it easier for one or two guys or women to install these what used to be complex systems that are now completely miniaturized. So we're looking at things like protecting LNG terminals or any type of asset or operation. We provide sensors that can detect moving objects up to 1 kilometer. So this is an interesting area that we're exploring. One of many. Anytime you have a facility like this with a lot of shipping, then the question is, do we need the security system, or is it sort of just like, yeah, a feel-good thing? I've been working on diver detection systems since 2004 in the Greek Olympics, where we deployed a detection system to protect some of the vessels in the harbor that were housing all of the VIPs. They ran out of hotels. The truth is, in this security domain, it is a feel-good exercise until recently. Now things are getting a little bit more critical, so we're seeing a lot more interest in the subsea security domain and the fusion of the sensors that we have. 10 years ago, a system like this was $1 million or something dollars. Now you can get it for a few $100,000. So the economy of scale and everything, we rely on the commercial market. We're a completely commercial oriented business. Offshore oil rigs, of course, we're heavily involved in that in Norway, so that's kind of a no-brainer. Blow through that. This is a new area we're trying to get into, which is luxury yachts. So a lot of these guys have huge yachts, and why not throw $1 million at a fancy system to detect things around your yacht when you're on the other side of the world? So, they have the money, so we're looking into that market as well as security. It's basically security of navigation and assets. Naval bases, we're involved in this in various areas of the world. We're engaged with a lot of the Navy research labs currently doing experiments and looking at how to integrate some of our systems, primarily on the East Coast and in Florida, if you know who I'm talking about. Protecting naval ships and foreign ports, we have a bit of influence there. Power plants, so you can see anything that is based on the water is where we try and focus, or underwater. This is our guard point diver detection sonar. We acquired this technology a few years ago. Does a fantastic job. We're in review with the U.S. Navy to see where we can push this technology currently. It provides a 360-degree capability to see everything around you. You can put 6, 7 sonars into one system. It can track more objects than you'd probably ever care to track. And it's configurable, so we usually come on site and we work with the people who purchase it and try and suss out exactly what are they looking to detect. It's not always the same thing. The behavioral analysis of the software means that you could have it detect a fish, or you can have it throw away the fish. You can track a submersible moving faster than a diver, or it can throw that data away. So you really have to know what you're looking for, and then we help modify some of the algorithms for that. This is what a basic diver detection raw data display looks like. I won't go into it, but it's kind of like an ultrasound if you've had children. And so you're just looking at a few hundred meters of distance out, and you're seeing the track of a diver that's being been classified as a diver over the threshold. And so that's a bit about this. This is fun. We did tracked 11 divers in 1 meter of water. Probably the most impressive exercise I was ever involved in. It took some time. You have to measure sound velocities. You have to measure the environment to get a result like this. You don't just show up and throw it in the water and it works. You have to have some a priori knowledge about what your environment is like. We make software to do ray tracing underwater. If you're in the marine industry, we can model how your sound is going to travel across the water column so that you can adjust for environmental factors over the year, rain, sewage outflow, whatever. because I won't go into it, but green is good and red is bad. So you want to optimize the green so that your sonar is seeing the farthest away that it can. This is the Securus system, which I mentioned is used by Norwegian Coast Guard. It's got great capabilities, six-axis gyro stabilized system, so it locks on a target and it doesn't give up. Mostly it's used for oil and gas safety and security. Together with that system, we've developed something called CCOP. It's CCOP, COP meaning Common Operating Platform. So what this does is takes all of the sensor data that we produce or can buy from third parties and integrates it into one holistic picture. And it's got a million different features that you can use. Primarily, this came out of the oil and gas industry because it's monitored 24/7 for security. That includes leaks from the oil and gas operations, as well as people dumping illegally in Norwegian coastal waters. So there's two aspects to the security. One is security of the operations. The other is security of the fishing industry in Norway, which is huge. And so there's a lot of traffic going by. So we make a system like this that can be used for these combined operations. Sales guys love this slide because it basically shows you that we can integrate anything you want into the system, and then it provides some outputs, and it's all cloud-based. Security-wise, we do have point-to-point encryption. That's always a concern because we are pumping a huge amount of data through this, and it can come from a helmet cam, from a drone, from a sonar, from a vessel. That it supports all of that. This is another example of the CCOP software. So you're looking at a standard map with some overlays of a sonar or maybe a radar. You're looking at AIS data, perhaps some other integrated data that you can bring in to just have a common operating picture of what's going on in your harbor. We also do service. We have a 24-hour-a-day service that literally stares at radar and images in the North Sea waiting for something to happen. Companies pay us to have somebody on staff to just sit and watch. That is how important it is for oil and gas security in the North Sea. They take it very seriously. I forgot to introduce myself. Did you introduce me? Anyway, if you're interested more, we have a lot of different security products. They span a large range of sensors. I think I have my contact info on the site, so thank you for your time. Thanks to Michael Jones sitting back there for putting this together again. Good to see you. And thank you, Sushil, for your time.
Thank you, John. So let me just open quickly, give just a couple of minutes to make sure if there are burning questions after all these things were up there. If not, I could just do kind of a closing question to wrap up. What I would say is that what I've always seen is that either there are some crimes of opportunity, which is something like when the Maersk shipping line had all their systems get locked up around 2017. They weren't even the target of the attack. There were the Russians trying to go after Ukrainians, but in the middle, some of these corporations like FedEx and Merck got caught up, and then Maersk got caught up, and it ended up costing them hundreds of millions of dollars. Or you could have a situation like spoofing of GPS when a vessel's out there and sees itself in totally another part of the world, or 20 vessels see themselves clumped up in one spot. Those are kind of pretty active. Very obviously, somebody's going after you. What do you see as a quick wrap up of going forward, since this is a conference for people who are looking into new world, new markets, new opportunities? How do you see any new trend or new market opportunity that people should be aware of from your viewpoint? Let's just start with you guys.
Well, I'm not being in the market as a public servant. I would
Or
say,
a threat,
What's that?
or any threat that you see coming up, right?
Sure. I think Oh, I'm sorry. As a public servant, as far as what the direction of industry is going, I don't really have a good, clear visibility on that. I can say that the number of threats coming into the maritime transportation system is growing exponentially. And so really there's not a single source of defense. It's going to have to be industry working with government to combat those threats. And so I think that cooperation and approach, I think CISA is doing an incredible job providing, not as a regulator, but as providing as an assister. And I think that's kind of the model moving forward, cooperative vice regulatory.
Yeah, especially on the ICS side, they're really helping. Yeah.
I would agree with that fully. It's going to have to be a kind of a combined effort. Only thing I would add to that is to say, when you're approaching these vendors, push back on them security-wise. Ask them, what are you doing to secure this product? What are you doing to keep this product updated? What kind of regulatory compliances do you have to meet? How frequently are you making sure that you're meeting these requirements? Because sometimes I'll have a certification from 2017 and they kind of leave it at that. They just say, oh yeah, we're certified, but it's not a current certification. So ask them what they have, how current it is, ask them for copies of it, validate it on your own, and ask questions. Also ask them what the best practices are for deploying that equipment securely. Because sometimes they'll have a specific model where it's vetted or it's certified to be compliant for specific applications, but the way that you're planning on deploying it might not fit that model. So ask them, we're planning on deploying it in this manner. Is this secure, or what's the best way to secure this in that scenario?
Great.
Is it on? Okay. So going off of the talk of what I discussed, I would say that having worked a lot with airborne unmanned systems, I would say that the current surface vehicle environment is about 6 years behind where the airborne environment was, as well as the undersea environment. And because of the fact that there are so many opportunities when it comes to just a lot of economic opportunities in the ocean, the companies that are able to actually establish a presence in those domains for long periods of time and to be able to help these larger businesses make money out of that are really the ones that are going to disrupt the industry, because a lot of the things that we have right now aren't able to persist and sustain in those environments, but those that can are going to change it.
Great, thank you.
Good question. So as a commercial technology company, what I can say is that we like to be pulled in a certain direction. I think after 2008, commercial companies stopped just throwing IRAD money at products, hoping that if we build it, they will come. Now it's a very challenging environment. Prices are cutthroat, and so collaborations with key partners and establishing that is really important to bring new technology to the market, because just because we have the capability to do it, maybe we're just missing the boat. So we have to work actively with a lot of clients, and as part of the customized solutions organization for Norbit, a lot of these things run across my desk. And it's difficult. It's difficult to establish where you want to go when you're just waiting for somebody to tell you where you want to go. But that's the reality a lot of times that we're in now. Luckily, the U.S. Navy and Armed Forces are starting to focus more on COTS products, which means that we're getting much more pull from the market on where to position ourselves. So instead of having to take a chance, anyway.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for staying, and thank you for coming to this panel. I know that you had to change a lot of things to be here. Matt, do you want to come and give some closing here?